Welcome to the Collecting Keys Real Estate Investing Podcast with your host, Mike DeHaan and Dan Austin. From wins, losses, horror stories, and tactics for optimizing your business, Mike and Dan take a real, uncensored deep dive into the ins and outs of running a full-time real estate investment and wholesaling business.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to episode 58 of the Collecting Keys Real Estate Investing Podcast. And this is another episode of the Mike and Dan Show here, where we are going to tell you about how we are probably facing, I would say, I don't want to say it's like the worst week of business that we've had, but it's just like...
What did I call it before we got on air? What did I say? I'm not going to say
I think you said we were getting dick hammered. I think that was your word. But it is. We are in full-fledged, just getting it from everywhere right now. And I will say that the vast majority of the problems are being caused due to like third parties in the situations. And it's just like, other people that have financial stake in the game, be that, lenders, contractors, like a seller, finance, insurance companies. Everyone's getting weird right now, and us just sort of being the, what's the right word, like the service person, like the people that are, like, I don't know, the recipients of their service. We're the ones that are, taking the blunt of the trauma from these people.
We're getting the hammer's hitting us, man.
I know.
And we got a lot of irons in the fire too, so we have a lot of things concurrently working. Yeah. And then you throw a wrench in those gears, and then you throw another one, and you throw another one. You're like, it doesn't matter, just keep throwing them in there. We're already stopped.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the problem is, like you said, we do have a lot of irons in the fire. And, we have been sort of working over the past few months now where we're like middle of November, but we've been working to get like a lot of our dogs, I guess, off the books. And we've done that successfully for the most part, and several of them we actually made some decent money on. Like we were just talking about our tiny cabinets, and I'm so glad we got out of those, because if we were stuck on those right now, that would suck. But
it would suck.
Like just sort of where I think the thing that's so frustrating is we're like right on the brink of being done with like all of our sketchy stuff that we and I wouldn't say they're sketchy, like they were good and we bought them. The stuff that was sort of like higher risk as the market turned, we're right on the brink of being done with all of them. And then of course, as we're on like the the 10-yard line, stuff just starts to get weird with everyone that's providing the services for stuff. So
right. Well, and it's like weird, like we were talking yesterday about this, like we've got a few $100,000 tied up in properties and deals right now.
It's like $500,000, dude, that we're going to be sitting on for a while.
Sitting on. Yeah, it's like $500,000 that we're kind of hoping and expecting to have, but then all these things happen. We're not losing any money, which is cool. It would be better than sitting on this podcast talking about how we lost $500,000, although that would be entertaining. This is maybe going to be slightly more boring because we actually had different exits on all these things that we're comfortable with and that we're going to have to execute on. But it's just like little shit.
Yeah.
Like, last week we lost at least one roof.
Yeah.
So a windstorm.
Yeah, so we had a windstorm last week, followed immediately by snow. So from the windstorm, we lost a roof on one property, which the insurance...
At least one property. I'm trying to think.
No, I mean, we drove around the rest of them. We're looking good. I lost a tree on one of mine, which is going to cost me $5,500. But like that tree...
We lost a tree on our flip that's for sale right now. That was cool. You know what pisses me off about that? I'm going to go down this rabbit hole. So so we had a massive tree. Like, it's not like a little tree. It's like bigger than the one that you're paying $5,500 to remove, fell down at one of our flips. I actually drove there to look at the roof. I didn't notice it because I'm an idiot. But and I went inside the house. It didn't land on the house. The sprinkler guy was there a couple days ago, and he's like, "Hey, just so you know, there's a giant tree that fell over in your backyard, and it's like laying down towards like the neighbor's house." And the thing that makes me so mad about this is the neighbor has my phone number because she called me incessantly over the summer, yelling and screaming that our yard wasn't maintained, although she knew we were flipping it. And I told her, like, this is going to be the nice house. We're taking care of it. She reported us to the city, tried to get us to get fines and shut down our operation. Like, I mean, she was relentless, like twice a week calling me. And then one day I show up and we had a brand new trampoline that came with the house. I don't care about it, right? It's in her yard. She stole the trampoline after she complained to the city about our yard being overgrown. And then
did she steal it, or did it like blow in there during the windstorm?
No, it was like set up in her yard, dude. like just moved it into their yard. There's a fence between our houses. And so I was telling my wife last night, I was thinking about it. I was like, she did not have any, she couldn't have just called us and said, hey, by the way, a tree blew down in your yard last week. No, nope. She stole her trampoline. She reported us to the city. And I had this moment, like right when we got our house listed, the yard looks perfect. It's beautiful, right? New rock, new grass, all that sort of stuff. It looks great. I almost called her and said, hey, I think I'm going to report you to the city because your house looks like shit. Because our house is like nice, and hers is the scourge of the neighborhood. Like crappy grass, house needs painted, just not a nice house, right?
But she has a brand new trampoline, though. That looks nice back there.
Right. Well, my wife's like, do you just like want to just like call her to make her feel bad? I was like, absolutely, yes. I want to call her and make her feel bad because she is not a nice person.
Oh my God.
She stole her trampoline. She reported us to the city, and she won't even give me a call that there's a tree in her backyard that fell over.
She probably has a lot of issues in her life. We should probably call her and see if she needs a cash offer on her house.
You know what? I'm expecting a call from the city that our tree fell down and she reported it.
Yeah, probably actually. But
anyhow,
anyway,
back on track.
So that's one thing that we're dealing with right now is we've have several unexpected expenses because we have the roof that we found that the insurance company may or may not cover it because the roof was older than 20 years.
Well, the HOA mafia is pressuring us to not use it. She's like, oh, it's 23 years old. I'm like, I have no documentation saying it wasn't installed last year. What are you talking about? And I'll say
this is also on, if you guys have been following us for a while, on the freaking condo that we can't sell because of the HOA insurance issues that we're dealing with. So, so we have that one. We have this. Oh,
and the best part about it, the best part about this one is the HOA president. She's a nice lady, but she's like she's like the mafia. She's like pressuring us. And then she literally quoted the HOA rules about maintenance and making sure your house is presentable because of like the roof is damaged, right?
Oh my God.
I'm like, lady, we bought this and there was like a box truck full of garbage pouring. It wasn't even like in the yard. It was like pouring out of the house. Right. And you're going to tell me, which this house, it looks nice now, because a few shingles are missing, you're going to quote the HOA laws that we need to make our house presentable.
Like literally, when we bought it, there was a blue tarp over the garage, and we're still digging trash out of the grass because there was so much of it.
Yeah, it's so much of it. That's so funny.
Yeah, so we have these maintenance issues that we're dealing with due to the windstorm and then the snowstorm. And then now on top of that, we have a deal that we have sold that there was a seller finance note, and the lender has decided that they don't want their money back, so they're basically refusing to allow us to sell the note. And as part of our agreement that we had with them, there was and this is a good learning lesson for everyone, but they basically had to approve us paying them off. Which when we signed it in the back, they're like, yeah, of course, why would they not approve us paying them off? Like, that makes perfect sense. But they decided, no, you can't pay us off, and they're not going to release the lien on the property. So we're in the process of going through that and trying to negotiate with them to allow them to transfer, to allow them to allow us to transfer the debt onto another property, second position, which I am optimistic about, but that's just a freaking stressor because that house was supposed to close yesterday, and now we're having to push it off for a week, and there's still some gray areas with weird stuff because they don't want their money.
Well, the thing that upsets me about this, like everything that we're dealing with right now, there's just no logic. No. Is that they don't feel comfortable they don't want their money back, and they don't feel comfortable putting on another property yet the property that it was backed by is gutted. It was rotting away and falling. It's a piece of crap.
Yeah, and we sold it as a fixer upper, and there's literally no value to it except for to a flipper.
Yeah,
and that's the thing when I was talking to the guy on the phone, and we're having to play hardball with him a little bit, and I was like, dude, so I guess if you're not going to let us do this, we'll just walk away and you'll take this house back. And he goes, those houses are a great asset. We'd love to take them back. And I was like, have you seen the houses, dude?
Right? They're not.
They're not like the shitty, because when we bought them from them, they had owned them for a long time. The sellers had
like 30
years, yeah, and they'd had the same tenant the whole time who was a heroin addict and would just go in there and this whole thing. But when we bought it, we did what all investors do. We tried to increase the rent, and they said, cool, and they pieced out. And there's 30 years of squalor in this horribly maintained house were super apparent. And we made the decision of, instead of fixing it up, let's just gut it get it ready for an amateur flipper and list it on the market, and that's what we did. But I think they're under the assumption that it's still like a little
movable, livable,
yeah,
livable.
which I would argue it wasn't livable when those other people moved out. Anyway.
No, that place is rough.
It was really
dude.
bad.
That place is rough.
But so we're dealing with that and trying to negotiate that, and so they're just being a pain in our ass. And then so after I get chewed out by this guy, literally like 6 minutes later, I get a call from the lender. If you guys have listened for a while, you've heard about how we have our house that has the oil furnace leak that we finally fixed, and are working on getting.
It's also flooded. The basement's also flooded before that.
Yeah, we had also issues with it, but our main play with this house was with the oil furnace house was there was a separate lot that we could subdivide that we would be able to sell because it's in a higher profitable area. So we have that process almost done. We have the lot ready to sell. We went to the lender to do a reconveyance on the loan.
We have a purchase and sale agreement signed
on the lot. And the lender, when we originally talked about it, they were like, yeah, that's totally cool. Like, just let us know. I'm like, we'll figure out the details. Yep. But now the interest rates are sky high, right? Money's getting weird and all this stuff. The lender came back yesterday and just saying, just so you know, we're not going to let you sell that lot unless you fully refinance the loan, which will result in you paying the 5% prepayment penalty and will also require you to basically take your rate that we have at 4.75 and bring it up to 8.5 or whatever it is. And so they're like, yeah, sorry, that's the only thing we're willing to do for you. So yeah, the company's Lending One. If you ever want to use them, just make sure that you screw them. They're a large national company, and it's fucking bullshit. This whole thing that they
will be out of business by next year. Anyway,
totally,
so it doesn't matter.
And they just screwed over our acquisitions manager as well, who has a property that he's been trying to cash out refinance. And literally, he went down the rabbit hole with doing get him all the docs, all that sort of stuff. I don't know, it was a month and a half ago. Appraisal's taking a while, whatever. And they told him they would give him an 80% cash out on this deal. Literally, it was supposed to close 2 days ago. Supposed to sign docs for the refi, and they came out the day before and said, "Look, so actually, we're only going to give you 71% now, and if you want to get out of the deal, you're going to have to bring $16,000 to the closing table."
Just asinine.
Which is asinine. They changed it literally at the last minute. So don't use them as a lender. Instead, you can hit us up if you need a hard money loan.
Yes, we'd be happy to do that.
So we won't retrade you at the last second like that. But it's just getting weird all around, man. Do we have anything else that's going on that's real? That we're getting raked
so
over
that
the
not being able to sell the lot that we own, which stinks.
That's going to cost us $160,000 in revenue for the year that we're now going to have to probably wait 5 years to get because of the prepayment penalty that they have.
Yeah, that we're just not willing to pay.
Yeah,
right. And there's a difference. We're in a financial position to where we aren't willing to take massive losses on shit just to take losses to get our money back. There's no point in that. So that. Yeah, that's going on. We've got tons of property maintenance issues, trees falling down, roofs missing, and then just our flip sitting on the market, which is a fun one to talk about. I mean,
yeah, we'll dive into that here in just a minute, but yeah, I mean, and then now even. Just the whole wholesale market as well. We had a deal that we sent out that was pretty solid that we just haven't even had a sniff on.
Nope.
It's just been a tough deal all around. And I don't know, it's one of those sort of situations. It's I guess we've had tough issues periods of time before in the past. I feel every 6 months or so we go through these phases where things just suck. Yeah. I think the thing that's just challenging right now is because of the momentum of the market being in a sort of a negative light. It feels more drastic than it realistically
feels heavier because there's not an expected timeline of don't worry, it'll rebound. once we get through this, it'll be fine. Mm-hmm. So it's just it's a lot more challenging to have that vision going forward.
It's a lot more challenging to be excited about because I mean, thinking back to was last spring, 2021 spring, where we had a ton of stuff with we were having some I remember we were trying to flip that house that the people wouldn't move out, or we had tried to cash for keys them, and then we tried to evict them and they wouldn't do that. That was one. We had that combined with a couple other sort of purchases that were getting weird. That was the same time that we had sold that property to the tenant, and we checked that we would pay closing costs on it.
That's so awesome. I forgot about that.
And the thought was we'll pay title costs to make this easy, but he And the lender interpreted it as like, oh, we'd pay their loan costs. So the lender was like, sweet, 6 loan points that you guys are going to pay. And we were like, what?
Yeah.
So we were dealing with all that sort of stuff. But I mean, I don't know. It always comes around. And I think the biggest thing is when you get into these hard sort of times is to, try not to get super emotional and to, just sort of keep going through and making sure that you're protecting yourself along the way, that you're doing things kind of by the books as you can. And then, I think the number one defensive strategy that you can do, and this is what we'll talk about in the educational portion here, we'll leave this a little bit, is making sure that you are buying right so that when things do inevitably get weird, you have room to be flexible and stuff and to pivot and to try different things. Because this is where people now that have been losing their ass, which they've been abundant, this has kind of been a joke in our morning meeting with our staff, has been like, oh, another one bites the dust. Like,
another one bites the dust.
We've had local companies going under left and right. Like one of the biggest companies here in town is having a huge loss for the year and is now out of business. Dan got an email from one of our other competitors last night that basically was like, hey, we're going out of business. We need to offload all these properties. Do you guys want to buy them? And then proceeded to have absurd asking prices for all of them.
Of course. It's just like Daryl's like,
we should realistically offer him like half those because he's a dickhead anyway.
Yeah.
But then like even the big dogs, right? Like Redfin announced that they're closing down their iBuyer program, and that they're laying off 18% of their staff, and their stock is down 91% on the year.
Just a mere 91%.
Yeah, right.
No big deal. Like almost all of it is gone.
Yeah, but
like literally,
what all those people have in common is they did not buy right at the start. They were not getting actually discounted properties. Because I will say, a lot of the people that are in our circles that are doing that, whether they're in our instant investor group, they're in the other masterminds that we're in, they're doing okay. And even if stuff's getting a little bit tighter, they're not making as much money. I don't think we know anyone that runs the same sort of business practices and the same sort of strategy as us that is completely going sideways.
Yeah, losing their ass. Yeah, no, and it's like, to your point, like I've always said this is like, you cannot scale a flipping business to that, like what you saw with Zillow, Open Door, Redfin. It just doesn't make any sense because real estate is so local. You have to have local knowledge, and you put a bunch of dorks behind a desk and you incentivize them through commission structures to go and buy houses. And yeah, you're like, oh, it makes sense. If we buy 1 million houses with $1,000 of margin, like that's going to be profitable. It's like, yeah, but then that $1,000 of margin goes away so quickly. If you're buying things at 97%, ARV, and we saw it with local companies here where it's like you do one, like, you and I have pressed a little bit, right? Like we've bought one where you're like, oh, it's tight. But then you have to know and check yourself where if all the deals you're buying become tight, and the market is getting top heavy like it did last year, like just your intuition should tell you, hey, maybe I should slow down and start peeling these things back.
Yeah.
Most people just I don't know, it's like an addiction. They can't. They're like, I just got to keep buying deals, It's never going to stop. The gravy train will keep going. And guess what? It doesn't. It doesn't keep going.
Yeah. And,
balance it out. You know what I mean? Just balance your acquisitions out.
Yeah. And that's definitely super relevant for like the iBuyers because they were literally just going for the volume game. And I don't know if I ever talked about this. I was in a wedding, I guess it was like a year and a half ago now, for one of my buddies, and one of the other groomsmen, he worked for Zillow's like iBuyer program back before they went under. And I remember like at the pre-wedding,
but he doesn't have a job.
He doesn't. So I mean, he got laid off.
You made sure to follow up.
Well, I know. I just heard through the grapevine.
Sorry.
But I got into a big argument with him at like the pre-wedding dinner because I was like, bro, like what you run, you work for this program, and he was like a manager. He had like 10 sales guys working underneath him. They were doing all stuff in Arizona, and I was like, you realize that that business that you guys are doing, I know you're backed by Zillow, but that's bullshit. Like it's not going to work. And I was like, I do the same business at a smaller scale here. Like I know that it's not going to work. And he got super defensive and was just like arguing with me, and to the point that he didn't talk to me like for the rest of the weekend. Like we just like weren't friends anymore after that. And then, lo and behold, that whole thing went under. They lost a shit ton of money. He got laid off. Their whole division went gone. And I was like, don't know what to tell you.
Well, just so. But I know you feel good about that too.
The unfortunate thing is I do.
A little bit.
I do a little bit. But the thing that's crazy is I remember when I was arguing about it, his argument was they're doing it for market share. They're trying to be like the premium buyer, like the only option. They were trying to like outbuy Redfin and Open Door and OfferPad and all these other companies, right? But I'm like, they're all gonna fail. Like, there's no point in trying to compete for market share in a market that doesn't exist. And the crazy thing is, one of our main competitors here that is no longer really around, I remember them saying the exact same thing when they were buying deals last year. And I would talk to them and I'd be like, this is like really tight. Like, how are you guys making money on these? And he goes, oh, we're willing to like make tiny gains because we're gonna be the premium buyers here in Spokane. And fucking, where are they now? They're gone.
Well, you know, and the biggest challenge with real estate, and you and I know this, we just talked about this, we got $500,000 locked up that we were hoping to get, is like, it's so illiquid. Yeah. And it's not illiquid all the time. Like this last summer and summer before that, houses were flying off the shelf. Everybody talked about, I had 60 offers in 2 days. Okay, perfect. But when it starts getting, the ground starts shaking, it's a super illiquid asset. Look at who's, trying to sell houses that are sitting on the market for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. Now you can't trade out of it. So now you bought all this market share, but as it's going down, you're going down with it because you cannot trade it out fast enough. Yeah. It's like a stock. People lose their ass on those too, but you can still trade that usually pretty quickly. Real estate, not so much. And then while you're holding on it for 60, 90 days, something else happens. Like a freaking tree falls down and costs you $5,000.
Exactly. Or like a tenant, causes damage, like you have a leak, you have to be spending money just to maintain it in general. Yep. But the thing is, too, that's the norm. It's really only in 2020 and 2021 that people forgot that. And that's why it was just like they
forgot quickly.
Yeah, that everyone was leaving their jobs to go and get into investing in real estate. But, and you can still make money. I mean, you still can. We're making money. We know other people that are making good money. You just have to be realistic about the expectations. So anyway, I think that is a good transition, though, to what we wanted to talk about for our educational portion this week, which is what exactly are your options when you have a flip or a property that you're trying to sell that doesn't sell, and how do you analyze those different options? I think it's a super relevant topic for right now. There's a lot of people that have got themselves in a situation, including Dan and I. We have a flip right now that I would have maybe amazed if we sold it at this point because we've had just so little interest on it. But so we'll go through kind of stuff that we look at, what options you can explore. But really quick, a few words about our Instant Investor program. The Instant Investor program is our 12-week group coaching program, which includes a self-driven course and access to our private investor community. We will take you through the full process of how we find our leads, how we market, how we do our sales and follow-up, and how we determine the best strategy for every opportunity that comes our way. On top of that, you will also join a community of other like-minded investors nationwide that are all marching towards the same goals, and you will have direct access to Dan and myself so you can continue learning and growing with us as we continue to adapt and grow our business. So whether you're a new investor or already established, our systems can help take you to the next level. So if you think you might be a good fit, go to the instantinvestorprogram.com and schedule a call, and we can have you talking to motivated leads in as little as 2 weeks. All right, so when you have a property that you are trying to sell, you're trying to get out of, but it's just not going for some reason, and you're probably on that, obviously if you have like a big spread, you can drop the price, you can do all that sort of stuff. But what happens when you reach the position of, you're going to lose money, there's just not a lot of buyers? How do you sort of look at your different options? What exactly are they? And, how do you sort of analyze which option is right for you? And I think emphasis on that last part is that that's going to be different for everybody. So, option number one, obviously, is you can keep dropping the price until, you're going to lose money, but you just sort of accept that, right? And depending on where you are in your journey, that can be, that's a very personal choice if you decide to do that. And depending on where you are with your business and your investing journey, it's sort of affects what is the correct option for you. So, one thing I'll say is I sold a house and accepted a $30,000 loss in the middle of 2020. Actually, when Dan and I were building our business, we had just started working together. And I made that decision strategically because the house was vacant because of I was using it as an Airbnb at the time. And COVID had basically cleared all of our books. So I had a huge liability that I could not afford to pay. And I had a ton of capital that was locked up in there just because of how out of hand the renovation had got, that I realistically needed to for Dan and I to continue to grow our wholesaling business and to be able to buy more properties together. So big picture, I said, I'm going to sell this house. I'm going to take a $30,000 loss. But I am also going to get like $128,000 back in my pocket. Right. So that was like philosophy of money. And then same thing. We had a deal earlier this year that, like right as the market started to turn, was that like June timeframe.
I think we got it on the market, like in June or July.
June or July.
Right,
yeah. So
it's closed in July. Sorry.
Yeah. So it was right as stuff started to get weird. And when we originally bought it, it was a tight deal, and we knew that we had like a pretty small spread. It was like 18,000 ish. And then as we went through the reno, there was extra stuff that needed to be fixed. We went over budget, and then we had it under contract, and we were set to make like 4,000.
It was like close. It was close to break even for us. We were just like,
it was close to break even. But then during the inspection, they flagged the furnace, and we had to do a furnace replacement, which basically pushed us under. So we lost like $4,000, right? And we made that decision to do that because we were going to be getting $100,000 worth of capital back. So. Yep.
Which we needed for our next project, or we wanted. We didn't want to tie it up in that asset at that time.
Exactly, yeah. So all that point being that if you are in a position where, A, you really need that capital and losing the money is worthwhile to get that capital back, you have things to do with that money, right? Whether you're like an active investor, you have other investment opportunities, your opportunity cost for that money is better if you go and apply it to some other things. Then that should definitely be something you consider, honestly. And it's not going to be catastrophic to your financial well-being. But I will say, if the loss is going to be catastrophic to financial well-being, you probably shouldn't have done that investment in the first place.
Right. Yeah.
So those are reasons to consider it. But like I will say, if you're a casual investor, you're doing like one flip every 2 years. It's like a rental property that's not your favorite. You're looking to sell, and you're going to be put into a loss, but you don't need the money. You are looking over a long-term time horizon. You maybe are looking at building a rental portfolio, and that is your ultimate goal. If you have the ability to refinance it, and you're like, that's an option for the type of property that you have. Like, only thing that wouldn't be if it was like some sort of weird rental some weird property you can't rent for some reason.
Something wild, something out of the ordinary. But, and like, I don't know, like going back to the, like talking about selling for loss and what you do, I think a good example that I've seen in a few people, I know a few people that do this, they're 100% flippers. That's all they do. Just a single person show. Like they do all the work themselves. They buy a house. They sometimes pay cash for the house. They have enough money built up. They can pay for the renovations, but the only income comes from when they shave a little profit out for them to live on. So what do you do if you've got, say, $400,000 of your wealth, that's maybe close to all of your net worth, locked up in a deal, and you can't sell it, but like if you rent it out and you have to refinance it, like it's maybe break even, it's not great, like what do you do? If it was me, I would instead of selling it at a major loss, like, and when I'm saying like selling it at a loss, I'm saying like maybe you got $400,000 locked up in it and you're going to lose like 50, 75, 100,000.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money for that person.
It is. Yeah, exactly. And so it depends on your financial position. Exactly.
And so, but what do you do then? Mm-hmm. Do you go and find a job? Because you've worked for yourself.
Yeah.
I would seriously consider that. If that's if I needed that money for living expenses, I would personally try and find a way to like go and get other living expenses, because I'm the person who my main job and the main way I do things is just flipping houses. I do 2 a year. I make $100,000 a year in profit. I just keep rolling and rolling and rolling. Like that's probably a good strategy for you instead of losing your money. Yeah, in my opinion there. That's what I would do, because it's not like you're going to take that money and go and retrade it some other way. Mm-hmm. Where like you and I might take that money because we're not just flippers. We have a diversity in our income streams and we could reinvest it in other places. And we are, at the end of the day, buy and hold investors.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's like the number one sort of thing you can look at. And like you said too, it depends on your goals. And I mean, that's one of the reasons that a lot of the businesses that we know here in town have, or not just town in general, have been losing a lot of money, because that is their strategy, is they're flippers. They're not buying things that are properties that really make sense as rentals, whereas we typically always do that as our second exit strategy. So that's the first option, is you go and you sell it, for a loss, right? And whether that makes sense for you, you have to look at the big picture and if that makes sense for you personally and for your business. The second option is you turn it into a rental, you refinance the property, you lock up a ton of cash and you have, just like sort of a poor cash on cash return or like a less than optimal cash on cash return until, sometime in the future where you're able to get out of that asset, right?
Yeah, and there's a couple things that might force you to have to refi. Like you might think, look, well, why do I even refi if I've got a good rate or whatever? Well, if you have a hard money loan, typically you're going to have 12 months.
Yeah, that's true. So,
to do that.
Yeah, so I guess I will say by saying that refinance, that is under the assumption that you bought it with cash or you bought it with hard money to do as a flip, which obviously if you bought it with a conventional loan, that's very, very different.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways, right? So maybe you did buy as a conventional loan, which would be weird if you were trying to flip it.
Yeah.
Right. But so if it's hard money, typically you got a 12-month balloon, you're gonna have to pay it off. If it's a private investor, they may want to get paid off in 12 months. They might be okay with you keeping their money and staying in an interest-only position. Like we actually have a guy like that, except for he wanted to move it out of the property into our hard money lending fund, just because he wanted to be a little bit more liquid. And so we're cool with that, right? We're like, yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll get you your money back and we'll put it in our fund. But he was like, yeah, I kind of wanted my money back by now, but like I'm getting paid interest payments. I'm not going to get that profit in the stock market. Yeah. Keep my money and keep paying me. It's still a performing asset. So you might be in that position too, where you don't actually have to refinance, or they might say, yeah, I do want my money back because they're getting nervous. So now you do have to go refinance. And the other thing is maybe it's all your own cash. What do you do? And you might need that for living expense, or you might need that to go and reinvest somewhere else, which would obviously force you to refinance.
Yeah. Well, I guess, if you need that to go and live on, but I will say that if you do have all of your cash in there and you don't necessarily need that money, but you can instead get it rented and just collect like fat cash flow, that might be better for you. If you don't have
at least in the short term.
Yeah. If you don't have other plans for that money, and with interest rates the way they are, I mean, that could be a good play. So, let's say, your options are you have $300,000 of your money tied in this house. You can rent for $2,000. After taxes set aside, you collect $1,500 a month in cash flow. Or you go and you have to refinance out at an 8% rate. Let's say even you do like a half refinance, you pull out $150,000, but you lose all that cash flow. You kind of have to analyze what makes more sense for you and what you're looking to do with your life and your finances.
And I think the point there too is what you're saying is it doesn't have to be one or the other. It's not binary. There could be a blend in what you do that makes sense for you, but don't think because it was a flip, your only exit's to sell it.
Yeah. That goes back to, you need to buy the properties right as well and have those different exit strategies. So
you and I have preached that for a long time, and sometimes it sucks.
Oh yeah.
When you're buying projects and you're like, well, my criteria is that the worst case scenario is I can rent this thing out at break even. And when we say break even, I always like to remind people, I mean break even after PI, TI, principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and all my utilities and set asides for OPEX and CAPEX and vacancy.
Yeah.
Break even or $100 a door.
Yeah.
That's worst case scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes it sucks too, is I think this is what bit a lot of people last year is they were faced with the, situations of I could keep this as a rental, make $200 to $500 a month or whatever in cash flow, or I could flip it right now because the market's so crazy and make $50,000. And the thing is that becomes addicting for people. And sure, that's great, while the market's good, but once the market starts to shift, you're going to look back and be like, dang, I should have kept some of those properties because now I have nothing. And that's the one thing I will say that we did very well that I'm proud of us for doing is we had the delayed gratification of those paychecks, and we built a pretty substantial real estate portfolio over the last couple of years while other people were out buying Ferraris and doing all that sort of stuff. It's that's cool, but a lot of those people are now in big trouble.
Yeah, and their Ferrari all of a sudden became illiquid because I've watched so many videos where guys are like, it's an investment to be in an exotic car. Yes, but sometimes it's not.
Yeah, it is when the economy is really strong and people are spending
and the supply chain constrained and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So be smart about it.
Yeah. So that's the second option is to turn it into a rental, whether that means you have to refinance it or you just put a tenant in there and you sit on it for a longer term.
And before you transition, I do want to mention, because I did say break even cash flow. You and I just looked at an option of going negative cash flow on something recently, as an option. We didn't pull the trigger on that as an option because of the value of an asset that you might be willing to take negative cash flow for 12 to 24 months, and then just calculate that into your profit or your loss.
Yeah, for sure. Well, on that specific number we were looking at, it was going to be a negative $20,000 over 4 years, but it's going to give us access to like $125,000 or something.
Exactly.
Which for us is a no-brainer, because that just means we need to make $5,000 a year off that $120,000, which we have the ability to do so very easily with the way our business is set up. So, but like, again, that all depends on your situation. If you're working a W-2 and this rental's like a side hustle for you, that might not be the case, right?
Sure.
So anyway, renting it out and refinancing it to maybe cover the capital. The third option, which I think is not the option most people would consider, and you can add in if you think there's another option besides this as well, Dan, but it's to let the property go and to get foreclosed on, which comes with a lot of consequences, right? In terms of your credit, in terms of, potential lawsuits from the lender, depending on the situations that come up and all that sort of stuff. This is never an option that we've had to explore, fortunately, but this has been something that a lot of people have had to explore recently. But if you're in a situation where you're completely underwater on the property, let's say that, you've done the reno, you're unable to sell it, you're underneath, and now like a tree fell on the property, you can't afford to get it fixed, you can't accept a cash offer from an investor, because you have no equity in it, you have to bring one to the table. This is a legitimate option for people. And, there are consequences with it, but like at the end of the day, like if that's what you need to do to get it off of your books and like be able to move on with your life, that is something that, people do explore. And the thing that's kind of interesting about, foreclosures and defaulting on debt and things like that is, when you're like a small business or you're like an individual, it's like an extremely big deal, or at least it feels like it does. But if you like look at that same principle going up to corporate levels, there's like corporate companies will default on debt and get foreclosed on things like that as like a business strategy on like a regular basis.
Sure.
Like
the problem with that, the challenge is that they can still go and buy a house when their company goes out of business. You can't.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. So that's the big difference, is they have that separation there. But, like if you are in a position where you're actually stuck, so
it's an option. It's like probably worst case option.
It's the worst case option for sure. But like I said, one thing that if you are going to go this route, especially if it's with, like a hard money lender or like a private money lender, like I'd say like a smaller hard money lender that's like local, have a conversation with them about the situation. And actually, you would be surprised if you are a cordial person, you've done things right, and you're just kind of like a victim of circumstance, how likely they are to work with you in some capacity. So, like there will probably be lawsuits or things like that, especially if they've lost substantial money. But let's say you're the one that's kind of losing the money and you just need to walk away from the property. It's highly likely, and I used to work for a hard money lender that would explore this, that they'll let you just sign a deed them over to the property and just walk away, and they won't even necessarily pursue you because they didn't lose anything, right? Especially
and now they have an asset.
Especially if there was no malicious intent. Where people get into trouble is they start doing weird. They ghost the lender. They stop paying their loan. They ignore the letters for a year or longer, and now the person's coming after them because you're costing them money. If you call them up and you say like, "Hey, I got in a bad spot. Like, I need to just get away from this," you'd be surprised at how willing, especially private and I would say like smaller institutional investors are willing to work with you.
I couldn't emphasize that enough. And that's where always being engaged with your private lender or your hard money lender at that point in time, because like you said, let's put the example, say you have a house that's like completely renovated. Like you obviously bought it at below market. You put your money into it to renovate it. Like what are they going to get? A nice house in return?
Yep.
That's not a bad deal for them always. Or just negotiate, like, hey, like, can you give me 6 more months? I'll pay another point or whatever you guys need. Give me 6 more months. I'm going to keep, like, especially if you're being able to make your interest payments, that helps. Or just negotiate with them, like roll it in. I mean, there's so many options there with that before you get to the point of just giving it back to them. You should at least ask and explore and be open to different options.
Yeah. I mean, and just like with any other sort of creditor, it's expensive for them to pursue you. Right. And like they realistically know they're not going to get everything that they're entitled to anyway. So if you're willing to make stuff easy for them, like they'll throw you a bone, more often than not. Because like when people start suing each other and people are like trying to seize back properties, things like that, it's just like a lose-lose for everybody. And that's one of the things that I think is kind of silly. See some of these larger operators, especially some places in Idaho where stuff got so out of hand last year, where like somebody even in our instant investor group, they work for a company that has a ton of properties that they're foreclosing on right now, and they're all from the same company, right? Because the person literally just stopped paying the notes and just like disappeared off the face of the earth. So now they're like suing them and they're doing all this sort of stuff. And it's like, if they had literally just said like, hey, we're a professional business, we were trying to do this, and now we're just in like a bad spot. Can we, figure something out here? I guarantee you it would end better for every single person involved.
Totally. Absolutely. Have the conversation.
Yeah, as opposed to them having to seize these properties back and sue this business. So it's tough. But, yeah, so I don't know. Those are the three options I have. I don't know. Do you have a fourth option, Dan?
I would say there's like a option B to all of these. Like 2B, like a refinance option is to not just look at a straight up rental, but maybe try to do like a lease to own, because there's a lot of people right now with high interest rates that may not qualify for with what are ridiculous qualifications right now, because lenders are not trying to lend on anything, that you could potentially collect more in revenue. So one thing that you could explore is saying like, hey, I know the market rent for this thing puts me at like negative $200, but what if I tacked on another 200 that goes directly to a principal pay down, and I collect a 10% down payment and give them a reasonable interest rate or reasonable pay down. You don't even have to have an interest rate. You could just say $200 a month goes towards principal to knock down equity. You can get that sales price you want today, if not a little bit more, and then do it on a 3-year, 4-year, 5-year balloon, to where basically if they don't execute it on that point in time, you get to collect everything and keep the house. Or best case scenario, they execute on it, and 3 years from now, the rates are in a good spot. They are in a good spot financially to go and cash you out, and now you get all that money out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
and you didn't go get negative cash flow for 3 years. You actually broke even or got $200 a month in cash flow. Whatever that number looks like, I'm just saying is like whatever that market rent is, you can typically tack on a little bit more for a lease to own option, or figure something else out there. And the nice thing about that is that then that person should, if they're good people, as long as you underwrite them properly, are taking care of the house and not you.
Yeah, exactly.
Maintenance wise.
Yeah, and we've done a couple lease to owns, and I guess that's a good point too. For if you're going the rental option, there are other ways to get more cash flow and get some capital back, like the lease to own, or doing Airbnb, or like the midterm rentals, the corporate rentals, things like that. You can charge a little more of a premium rate. They do come with more work, but if you do need to squeeze more cash flow out of them, and the property does make sense for that, those are other options. So cool.
It's not binary.
Yep. So awesome. So if you're in this reality right now, which for a lot of people, that you have a property that you're trying to get out of, but you just can't. Like I said, the 3 different options. Sell at a loss. I would say, if I would say in our preferred order and the way that we're pursuing things is, first is to refinance and keep as rentals, because we are long-term investors. That is our goal. The exception being if we did have like a huge amount of capital tied up that we're able to get out of with like a small loss, we would pursue that. But for us, refinance and keep as a rental. Second for us would be to sell at a loss if we needed to, and then obviously our last option would be to lose the house. But I will also say, just on that, one last note, these situations are why I think if you're going to get into real estate, you should realistically look at building a substantial portfolio, as opposed to staying really small and just being a really casual investor. Because honestly, right now, even if we have stuff that kind of gets weird, or we have to carry properties that are empty, the rest of our portfolio supports it. So it's not like it's coming out of our pockets. It's being paid for by the other assets, which is really, really valuable. Whereas if you have 1 or 2 properties and you just have a liability, which is where I was when I sold that property for a $30,000 loss a few years ago, that's a big deal. Like, to be sitting there having to pay a $2,700 mortgage check every single month out of your own bank account is very challenging. So,
absolutely. In a time where there's record layoffs going on across the country. And so it's like, how are you going to get that additional income? And I just add in there for flavor too, is like, Never mind. You lost it. All right. Well, if it comes back from Dan, maybe he'll make an Instagram story or something. Anyways, guys, thanks so much for listening. Please go and subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to follow us on Instagram, I'm at Mike_invest. Dan is at InvestorManDan. And if we didn't scare you off, or actually, how about this? If you want to buy real estate, but you don't want to be in a situation where you're going to lose your ass, so you're going to be doing the buy right part, like we just talked about,
you should come and learn how we do it. So go check out the instantinvestorprogram.com. We will teach you how to not go out of business like all of the other people around us, and how we're still making money because we buy properties correctly. And instantinvestorprogram.com, book a call to see if you'd be a good fit. So thanks so much, guys, and talk to you guys next week.
See ya.
Thanks for listening. Please leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And check us out at collectingkeyspodcast.com for tips and guides on starting your own real estate investment and wholesaling business.